The guild offers classes like beginner's dungeoning. Rio and his roommate Aman have taken the intro class. Rio asks the instructor that if after clearing a dungeon level, is there a way to travel instantly back to that level? The instructor has heard of such dungeons, but they are typically found to the south. After the final lecture, Rio, Aman, and the rest of the class go on a field trip to the dungeon in the center of the town, Lune. The town was built around the dungeon to facilitate its exploration. The town has built a huge protective wall around the dungeon in case the population of monsters spikes rapidly. This spike in the number of denizens of the dungeon is called the Great Tidal Bore. There has not been a great tidal bore for many years. Rio and Aman explore the first level of the dungeon and find a soldier ant. Rio casts an ice dagger spell to pin the ant down. Aman kills the ant. After the field trip, Rio suggests Aman works on his cardio. Rio and Aman visit the guild. They meet their roommates from room 10 and celebrate since Rio and Aman lost their dungeon virginity. Abel comes over to say hi to the crew from room 10. Rio's roommates are in awe of Abel. The rest of Abel's clan, Crimson Sword, arrives and takes Abel away to do post-mission paperwork. The big lug of Crimson Sword, Warren, carries Abel to make sure he does the paperwork. Crimson Sword gossips about Rio. The cute female wind mage of Crimson Sword is skeptical of Rio's power. She suggests they stalk Rio to see if he is truly a powerful wind mage. Abel just laughs. He assures his team Rio is a total water mage stud. Bruh. The next day, Rio and Aman return to the dungeon. They defeat wild dogs with icicle lance and swords. Aman becomes more confident. Aman can slay beasts without Rio immobilizing them with ice darts. A few days later, Rio skips the dungeon and visits the library. Rio wants to study alchemy. Rio borrows books and begins to read the tomes by the town's fountain. Suddenly, there is an eclipse and an explosion. Rio makes an ice shield to protect himself. Rio is confronted by a hot female with horns and a tail.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for.
This creature is an Akuma. She has the same rank as a griffin. The Akuma prepares an attack, a combination of hellfire and wind lance. Rio creates a 10-layer ice shield and deflects the attack. The Akuma draws a sword and charges. Rio draws the sword given him by the Fairy King. Rio is nearly stabbed but ducks out of the way at the last moment. Rio sprays the Akuma with ice darts. She dodges them easily. The Akuma notices Rio is wearing the Fairy King's hand-me-down clothes. The Akuma is stunned by the speed with which Rio can cast spells. The Akuma is amazed that Rio wields the Fairy King's sword. Rio thinks the Akuma is not as skilled with the sword as the Fairy King. The Akuma prepares a fireball. Rio douses her with boiling rain. The Akuma says she's out of time. The Akuma has enjoyed playing with Rio. She and Rio engage in verbal intercourse. The Akuma says she is one of many. The Akuma demands that she be the one to kill Rio in the future. The Akuma departs. Rio goes to the guild to take money from his account. He wants to buy copies of the books he took out of the library. From the window of the guild, Rio sees his roommates from room 10, and they are getting beaten up by 4 thugs. The 4 thugs are laughing. "We ambushed room 10 because you were tired. It will teach you a lesson. In the dungeon, monsters will ambush you, especially when you're tired." The thugs are none other than Dan from room 1 and his vicious roommate Toadies. Since ambushes are fair game, Rio knocks out Dan's 3 cronies by striking them from behind. Then Rio calls out Dan, "Are you feeling lucky, punk?" Dan charges Rio. With a laugh, Rio punches Dan so hard, the bully regurgitates his spleen and a few other vital organs. After the fight, Rio gives a healing potion to his roommate who is a healer. Rio's happy that his posse from room 10 is visiting the dungeon together and working on their stamina. That night, room 10 celebrates by removing their clothes and taking a restorative bath. The healer casts spells on Rio to help him recover from the damage caused by the Akuma. The healer is amazed at the injuries Rio sustained. Do you think the great title boar might just be happening around the corner? Rio's clan from room 10 are spelunking the dungeon without him. The trio has a close call with the goblin archer. They are surprised that such a strong creature would be on the 5th layer of the dungeon. Out of an abundance of caution, the room 10 trio decides to boogie on out of the dungeon. The fight with the Akuma the day before was a wake-up call to Rio. To hone his skills, Rio travels to the hills outside of town to practice his magic. The Akuma moved fast because of her wind magic. Rio needs to move faster. Rio lays down a belt of ice and shoots propulsive water jets out of his back so he can glide along the ice. Rio managed to bobsled 3 centimeters. The idea was a magic fail, at least for now. Rio calls it a day and heads into town to visit the library. Rio wants to continue his studies of Akuma and alchemy. The Room 10-3 rush to the guild to talk to Nina, the guild receptionist. They report the sighting of the goblin archer on layer 5 and give Nina the monster stone as proof. The oafish fighter from room 10 gets all googly-eyed around Nina. Nina leaves immediately to tell the guildmaster. The goblin archer on level 5 stuns the guildmaster. Goblin archers are never found above level 10 of the dungeon. The guildmaster tells Nina to immediately set up a meeting with Abel of Crimson Sword and Phelps of White Brigade. Abel and Phelps are childhood acquaintances, and they are the respective leaders of their adventure parties. When Crimson Sword and White Brigade meet with the guildmaster, he provides them with intel about the goblin archer. It has been 10 years since the last great title boar. Each party will be given 100 gold up front and 200 gold once the investigation of the dungeon is complete. The local lord has been notified and the region's knights have been placed on threat level DEFCON 5. First thing tomorrow morning, Crimson Sword and White Brigade will meet at the dungeon to investigate the potential great title boar. In the morning, Rio tells his roomies that he's off to the North Library to continue his research. The North Library has a more eclectic selection of tomes. Rio makes his way to the 2nd floor of the library. There, with stammering stare, he sees Sarah, the elven maid he met on the first day he arrived in town. Back at the center of town, at the doors of the dungeon, the guildmaster meets with the members of Crimson Sword and White Brigade. The White Brigade is a large group of adventurers. Phelps of White Brigade says all extra C rank and above members of his party will be manning the walls overlooking the dungeon. The guildmaster enters the dungeon with Crimson Sword and the core team of White Brigade. Abel immediately has a bad feeling. He asks Lynn, the cute mage of Crimson Sword, to cast a detection spell. Lynn's magic detects hundreds of life forms. Everyone flees the dungeon and the entry doors are barred. The guildmaster triggers his worst-case scenario plans to address the potential dungeon break. Back at the guild, the trio from room 10 have read a notice that the dungeon is off limits until further notice. A messenger enters the guild and says all adventurers should meet at the dungeon because there is going to be a great title boar. Maybe the guildmaster should have rung the church bells so everybody knows about the danger.
Bruh.
Inside the North Library, oblivious to the crisis, Rio and Sarah flirt. Rio is looking for information on an Akuma, but he lies and tells Sarah that he's researching golem creation. Lying to a woman is a great way to build trust in a budding relationship. Sarah offers Rio a tour of the library. It is pretty open-ended. The tour might include the rolling hills and sloping valleys of her body. The very first sentence of this series said Rio was a 20-year-old man who looked like a 12-year-old boy. Sarah is enamored with Rio. All Sarah knows about Rio is that he looks like a 12-year-old boy and he wears the Fairy King's unwanted clothes. Sarah clearly has an age preference. Back at the dungeon, archers and flamethrowers line the walls. The Lord's Knights man the walls in their clunky plate armor, and the knights wield their longbows. The doors to the dungeon blow outward, and hordes of goblins are released. The archers fire, the flamethrowers spew. The mages are told not to use all their magic, as there will be many waves of monsters in the attack. Goblin soldiers are charging. Goblin archers are spraying the defenders with arrows, causing devastating injuries to the adventurers. Healers on the walls are tending to the wounded. The guildmaster orders every arrow and weapon to be seized from the local shops, as this is an emergency. It is a long fight, and the adventurers are pausing to stay hydrated. The defenders start to run out of arrows. The F-rank crew from Room 10 arrive bringing arrows from the guild's armory. The first few waves of goblins are defeated. Team Crimson Sword and White Brigade leave the safety of the walls to take on the goblin bosses. Lynn, the Wind Mage, helps the strike team float from the wall to the battlefield, which is strewn with goblin corpses. A goblin general attacks. Wait! It is 3 goblin generals. This means there will be a goblin king. Lynn, the Wind Mage, and an Earth Mage from White Brigade aid the frontline fighters. After a superhuman effort, the 3 goblin generals are defeated. Then the all-powerful Goblin King charges. Abel and Phelps, along with Crimson Sword and White Brigade, work as a team to eliminate the Goblin King. Abel has a magic sword and Phelps has a magic halberd. Only Abel and Phelps have the power to defeat the Goblin King. Abel uses his perfect shadow power combined with total impalement. Lynn, the mage, unleashes bullet rain. The Goblin King is destroyed. All the defenders cheer. Meanwhile, at the north side of town, Sarah and Rio leave the library still flirting. Did it look like Sarah gave Rio a tour of more than just the library? Rio returns to the guild to find an unexpected party going on. The crew from Room 10 is recapping the battle for Rio. Abel comes over and congratulates the Room 10 defenders for their participation. The rest of Crimson Sword joins them. Lynn, the mage, asks Rio if he can really cast Ice Wall high in the air. Rio says he can magically create an ice wall 40 meters above him. Lynn is dumbfounded. The next day, Room 10 is unemployed. The dungeon is closed and all the other jobs have been scooped up. Rio shows up looking for magic copper ore at the guild. The guild is all sold out. Rio offers to employ the trio from Room 10 if they will quest for magic copper ore. The 3 guys are excited to serve Rio. Rio hears commotion outside the guild. Looking out the window, Rio sees 5 visiting knights accosting a young girl. I'll be really candid, this is flat out sexual assault. There are many visitors from the capital in Loon to investigate the great tidal bore. Dan from Room 1 shields the girl and tells the knights to leave her alone. The knights threaten Dan. The knights are nobility. Dan is a mere adventurer. A knight draws his sword and charges Dan. The knight slips as if he stepped on an icy patch. The knight is angry. Dan denies tripping him. The knight charges again and trips over mystery ice. Phelps turns the corner and tells the knights to go away. The knights tell Phelps to F off because he is just an adventurer. Phelps scoffs. Phelps is a Heinlein of noble blood. Phelps, being nobility, can boss the knights around. Phelps' descendant, Robert, will write the book Starship Troopers. Rio opens the window and introduces himself to Phelps. As captain of the White Brigade, Phelps was very impressed with Rio using magic to trip the knight. Later, Rio is eating dinner at the guild. Abel comes in and joins him. Rio notices Abel is all alone. Rio suggests Abel must be visiting the pleasure district because he is being secretive. Abel asks Rio for help. Abel needs to find some visiting knights who are sullying the good name of royal knights. Rio and Abel search the town and notice some mysterious adventurers. The nefarious adventurers ambush Rio and Abel. Rio casts 5 simultaneous nut-shot mammoth ice fist spells. The 5 attackers are all lying on the ground, writhing in pain. The lowly C-rank attackers are turned over to the town guard. It is the ambush festival in Loon. Across town, the 5 knights from earlier in the day decide to ambush Phelps. As the knights draw their swords, they are frozen in place and then roasted by the Inferno spell. The mage from White Brigade was the caster of the Inferno spell. Phelps says, "Very well done," as he walks away. The next day, Rio is told the guild is out of food, so Rio cannot get breakfast. In the guildmaster's office, he is meeting with the king's envoys. By royal decree, the king has requested all food from the guild. The dungeon is closed so the king's team can investigate the cause of the great title boar. The king's team is demanding adventurers to serve as their protective detail. The guildmaster throws a hissy fit. The king's representatives renege and say they will ask other communities to provide them with food. The king's representatives stand firm on their other demands. Rio, looking for breakfast, ventures to the inn where the Crimson Sword resides. Before Rio can check out the inn's restaurant, a girl bumps into him. She asks, "Are you an adventurer?" Busted! Rio fesses up he is an adventurer. The girl is frantic to find Abel of the Crimson Sword. Rio thinks she must be pregnant. The girl has a letter for Abel. Rio and the girl go to the guild where they find Abel and the rest of Crimson Sword. The letter is from a high-ranking professor from the capital. The professor is requesting that Crimson Sword provide security for the mages investigating the dungeon. With ominous music playing, Abel tells the story of the last great title boar. An A-class party of adventurers went into the dungeon to investigate. Their leader was an S-ranked swordsman. The investigating adventurers never returned. No, they never returned. And their fate is still unlearned. Poor adventurers! Sorry about that. It's from the 1960s.
Bruh.
Rio heads off to find breakfast. Crimson Sword chats with the girl bearing the letter. Her family is famous for producing high-ranking water mages. Lynn asks if water mages can cast ice walls high in the air. The girl does not believe such a spell exists. Abel tells his team to stop investigating Rio. As a water mage, Rio is stronger than all of Crimson Sword combined. At the dungeon, a team of mages has installed a tracker to monitor the party entering the dungeon. Crimson Sword escorts the investigating mages into the dungeon. After 3 days of meticulous exploring, Crimson Sword and the mages reach level 7. They have found no clues as to what triggered the uber horde of monsters. Back at the guild, the trio from room 10 is excited for all the money they earned finding magic copper ore for Rio. The guild announces that food is being imported from other cities. guild members will be hired as guards to protect the food shipments. They need the work. Rio asks a question at the guild, namely whether the monster stones were light or dark in color.
Bruh.
The guildmaster says the monster stones were light in color. More on that later. In the dungeon, the mages set up scientific instruments. Outside the dungeon, the tracking device flatlines. Crimson Sword and the investigating mages just disappeared from the radar. Do you think Rio should be called up to help with the investigation of the dungeon?